Hello, in this video I'd like to demonstrate some of the new features of HDR Light Studio version 2 and how that can improve your workflow in 3D Studio Max. Here I have 3D Studio Max. This is the design version, 2011 running. I have this vacuum cleaner model in the scene, as well as a camera and a skylight. The skylight is currently disabled because later on what I'm going to do is use HDR Light Studio version 2 to create an HDR for this scene, and I will be illuminating the scene with that, as well as getting the reflections from it. And I will be using iRay as the render engine, just because it's new and it's really geared for these product type scenes. And so for that, I'm just going to want to make sure I have the default lighting of 3D Studio Max disabled. So I just put a light in and turn it off. So what I want to do now is just switch over to HDR Light Studio version 2, and here you can see it running along with a couple of other boxes that you may not have seen before. What this is the live light feature, and this is really neat because what we can do now is export the scene, the 3D Studio Max scene, using the mental images format. And so what happens is you can actually drag and drop your scene into this live light view, and then set up your HDR and get real-time feedback. And then once you have everything configured, you just create the HDR and load it into 3D Studio Max and render the scene, and you get the same results that you would see here in HDR Light Studio. So in order to do that, let's just walk through a sample scenario. I'll bring 3D Studio Max back up, and what I want to do is go into the render settings here, and I'll go over to the processing tab, because what's going to happen is I'm going to export this scene as a MI file. So I come down, I select browse, and I'm just going to throw this on my desktop here. I'll call this vacuum and hit save. And I don't have to worry about any render settings, because once this is enabled, it's simply going to go through and make this file. So if I hit render, you can see that it exported the scene, and that's done. So what I can do now is just minimize this, and here you see the MI file that it just created on my desktop. And let's just drag that over to the live light feature. And there you can see the vacuum cleaner is loaded in. It kept the camera data, so we have the same angle that we did in 3D Studio Max. And what I can do now is just start setting up the HDRs. So let's just go in and create, let's use some of the new soft light features here. Let's find that one, looks good. And what I want to do is just rotate this guy around, maybe 180. And you can see that it's getting the reflections here in the live light view as I move this guy around. I'm going to put him somewhere like so, and I can expand it out to enhance this side of the vacuum cleaner model. Maybe make that a little bit thinner, something like so. That looks pretty good. You can dial down the opacity a little bit if you like. Looks good. I'm just going to make another copy of this and move it up. Kind of put a reflection up top here somewhere. Maybe something like so. Maybe bring that rotation back around. Dial down the wattage or the strength of this one. Just want to highlight the edges here. And maybe now let's add another light, another one of these soft lights. Maybe that one will work. And let's put it somewhere like so. Maybe rotate it around. just to add a another highlight here on the side. Just bring that up like this and turn this one down. Something like that. And that's looking pretty good. What I'd like to do is maybe add a highlight here on the front. So what I can do is just add a regular light source in, something like so. Maybe change the bulb length and the position. Let's put it at the bottom. Decrease that fall off a bit, just to give it a nice gradient. I might want to make this one a little bit wide. That's looking good. Kind of match it up here with this other highlight that I see. And actually, I think I'm pretty fine with that. So I believe I'm ready to export this over to 3D Studio Max. So when I do that, all I need to do is actually render an HDR or an EXR file. So I'll hit the render button here. I'm just going to leave it at the default of EXR, and I'm going to leave the preset size 1500 by 750 because I'm just rendering a small image, test image here. So as you can see, I've already created one. I'll just go and put this as well. I'll call this vacuum 2 and hit save, and it goes through and creates this HDR. And with that, now I'm ready to go back into 3D Studio Max. So I'll just bring that back up. And what I want to do is load in the EXR file that I created into this scene. So I'll just clear this out where I had made one testing a while ago. I'll just go in, create bitmap. Let me cancel that. Just drag this over to the material editor as you normally would. And I want to go to my desktop where I saved that file we just created. And I'll call that vacuum 2 EXR. Load this in. And of course I want to set this up for spherical mapping since it does create a spherical image. And if I just close this and render, I'll be using mental ray. But what I want to do is switch over to iRay. So just load this up and switch the production render to iRay. Go to the render tabs, and I'm just going to leave it at the default setting of 1 minute. And go ahead and just render the scene. And it's calculating. I'm not sure how the video will hold up since this is a GPU renderer, but we'll go ahead and try this. What I'm going to do now is cancel this render. And as you can see, it looks pretty good, but it doesn't quite match up exactly with what we had in HDR Light Studio. And the reason for that is if I go into the material settings here, or the material manager, here in the offset, you have to enter in 3D Studio Max a negative 0.5 offset. And that seems to line everything up perfect with what you see in HDR Light Studio. Because again, if I go back to HDR Light Studio, you can see how that reflection on the side was more along the side than what we get in 3D Studio Max. It's up higher actually. And so with this offset now, if I go in and hit render, we should have exactly what we see in HDR Light Studio. And as you can see now, the reflection is in its correct place. So whenever you use this, just make sure that you put this offset in of negative 0.5 under U value to ensure that you match up exactly with what you have in HDR Light Studio version 2. Actually, I'll go ahead and stop this render because it looks pretty clean already. And before the video cards become increasingly loud. So that's the scene here. As you can see, it's really simple to use HDR Light Studio version 2 with 3D Studio Max now, thanks to that live light feature. It's really nice to use, and you can export pretty heavy scenes into here. I've used some pretty complex geometry, so a really nice update to HDR Light Studio, and hope you enjoy.